What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing the connection between owls and abductees. I've been wanting to cover this topic for so long, and mainly it's because of not only my own recent remembering bits and pieces of at least one abduction I experienced that was completely repressed, but also for so many of you who have reached out to me with your own stories about experiences you all have had involving owls and possibly being abducted by aliens. As far as I can tell, the start of the quote-unquote flying saucer phenomenon, as it was called when the sightings first started being reported, think Betty and Barney Hill, happened in 1947 when a pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying his plane one day near the Cascade Mountains in Washington State in the United States. So as he was flying, he saw before him a fleet of triangular-shaped objects unlike anything he had ever seen before, flying in formation directly over the mountains. Now, it seems as though, at least as far as I could tell, that it was only a matter of hours of him reporting this that would be the whole startup of this UFO hysteria when it had officially begun. So he reports this, and within hours, it's hysteria. By the time a month had passed and what would come to be known as the Roswell incident had also happened in the desert of New Mexico, it seems the term flying saucer was on almost everyone's lips, and extraterrestrials became something more than mere fodder for so-called horror movies and science fiction shows everywhere. It's like they were suddenly now household names and somewhat acceptable to discuss around the dinner table, in the privacy of one's own home, of course. This was all well and good, and while the discussions were definitely now taking place and people seemed to be becoming more aware, no one knew anything about, really at this point, what it all actually meant. Or so it seems they didn't, until the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill happened, who I just mentioned above, and that happened in 1961. We've covered this very well-known abduction before on this channel many times, or at least discussed it, and most of us could probably recite most of it or all of it by heart. The married couple were driving on a dark, desolate, and lonely stretch of road on their way back from vacation late one night when they were allegedly taken aboard a UFO and experimented on. That seems to be where the first claims were made that perhaps these otherworldly creatures were interested in the human reproductive system more than anything else. These particular entities encountered by the Hills were described as emotionless and cold. It didn't take long after they came forward before not only was the public and the media searching for answers, but the United States Air Force got involved in this one as well. This one abduction, guys, had everyone so fascinated that a man named John Fuller was commissioned to write a book about it, and he gave it a very accurate and fitting title, in my opinion, as it was called The Interrupted Journey. Get it? Driving home from vacation, their journey home was definitely interrupted. Of course, and just with the publishing of that book at exactly the right time when the obsession with and hysteria over alleged abductions, it didn't take long before tens of thousands of people started coming forward with their own stories about their own encounters with extraterrestrials, many of which were very similar to the Hills' initial account. Unfortunately, we may never know exactly how many people, especially during this time, had actually come forward, mainly due to the shame, ridicule, and flat-out animosity aimed at the alleged victims and witnesses who, in my opinion, very bravely, first did speak out about their experiences. The Hills very much indeed included in all of this. So while this so-called alien abduction phenomenon might seem at first glance as something straightforward and relatively simple, it's actually a very intricate and multifaceted phenomenon with more layers than an entire field of onions, not to mention all the efforts made by certain government entities, still to this day I might add, as we all have very recently come to know as fact, even though we all kind of knew it from the beginning anyway, to silence witnesses, lose reports, and provoke the aforementioned scorn and animosity aimed at those who had the courage to come forward. There is one aspect that is seemingly very important to understand what's happening here with these abduction cases, at least most of the time, which is hardly ever discussed. And that includes right here on this channel. I'm guilty of not really covering this at all either. So that's the shape shifting taking place in so many different forms. It seems as though no matter where or how the abduction happens, witnesses/victims report seeing giant owls standing either on the side of the road, if they should be driving at the time, or at the foot of their bed, should they be asleep, or almost whenever it happens. Somehow the giant, and I mean giant, owls are always there lurking in the shadows right before the experience commences. So it's like there's this sighting of the owl, some lost time, and then they find themselves suddenly aboard a UFO and being subjected to all kinds of traumatizing and usually very painful experiments. There is also another way this happens though, at least allegedly, and it's when the person or people will see the owl and then there's nothing but haze and fuzzy, skewed, and sometimes missing memories of whatever happens next. The one thing they always remember in this scenario though is that they definitely saw a giant-sized owl that had deep, dark, and very intense eyes that they lost themselves in when they made the initial contact with them. Keep in mind as we go forward that the correlation between extraterrestrial abductions and owls has been being reported for a very long time, but it seems as though it's only now in more recent years that we're starting to not only take these reports more seriously, but also that we're finally able to start at least trying to connect some of the dots some of the time. So I wanted to find some encounters and reports that undoubtedly feature this particular vision or whatever it is, and our first one is kind of undeniable. A Scottish woman, we will be calling Minnie for the sake of her privacy and with respect for anonymity, lives in a town located almost remarkably close to Loch Ness, which depending on how you look at it, that could be another dot that may need connecting. But for now, guys, let's try and focus on the owls. Focus, Gemma. It was 2007 when she claims to have had her encounter, and she said it was a warm and clear summer day. She was walking her dog along the hills that overlook Loch Ness itself when something truly bizarre happened. From the description she gave of what she saw, she was staring right at what we have all come to know as a gray alien. She first saw it from a distance of a couple of 100 feet away and thought at first glance it looked like a small human child. She only came to this conclusion though due to the fact that it was so far away and the height of it. It was very small or short. So she started walking closer to it despite her dog refusing to move even an inch closer to whatever this thing was. It was then that she realized that she was not staring at a child, or at least not a human one, and she froze with fear and dread just as her dog had done steps behind her. Minnie made eye contact with the being and they stood there for quite a while, locked in some sort of staring contest or something. They were just kind of both shocked to see the other, I guess. When the entity suddenly reached out its arm to her, the second the gray alien's arms were fully outstretched, Minnie stated she watched as it transformed almost instantaneously into a large gray owl. It was, quote, impossibly large, end quote, the size of a full-grown man. It all happened so fast, and as soon as the transformation from strange alien to supersized owl was complete, the alien/bird thing took off faster than humanly possible into the skies and flew right over Loch Ness. As Minnie watched on in fear and a sense of awe and wonder all mixed together, it disappeared from sight into the trees, and possibly altogether. As she couldn't see where it had gone, there was no way to be sure if it just flew off into the woods or if it actually just vanished into thin air. Both are very much possible, right? So here's where the account gets even more interesting. Minnie is 100% sure that she did not experience any missing time at all and that her memories of the event are true and accurate and in perfect order, again, with nothing at all missing. Before we go any further, guys, let me posit this to you. Do we know or would we know if there was any missing time? I never realized it until very recently when I have had instances of missing time, but my experiences were a lot different because I also uncovered some false memories, not only that were given to me that I've managed to break through lately, but to my dad, who is steadfast in his claim that it happened the way he still remembers and that I originally remembered. He is still kind of bound by this screen memory, even though I know it's false. And the reason I bring this up is because could some people just be like my dad, who just don't know that the time there is missing? It is a bit different, and also I'm saving those stories for further videos and also for further articles in the Paranormal Press magazine about my abductions and my screen memories and all that. So back to Minnie in Scotland. She has no vague or foggy memories of a strange craft or any other beings or entities, no hazy experiments being performed on her, reproductive or otherwise. No bad dreams or nightmares involving any of this either, and she is adamant her memory is correct, complete, and 100% accurate and intact. A small, short, and gray alien outstretching its arms, turning into a gigantic owl and flying away across the loch and disappearing into the woods. That's her memory. Minnie has since come up with a very interesting theory as to what happened to her, and you'll have to let me know what you all think in the comments below about this one, guys, because I'm not sure. But some believe she is trying far too hard to rationalize and give regular and ordinary meaning to her extraordinary and surreal encounter that day. I've said it many times before, and I'll say it again right now. As human beings, we will go to great lengths to rationalize the incomprehensible and to make ourselves feel better about something frightening we may have come across that we can't make sense of or literally cannot wrap our minds around. I must say, though, that to me, her theory makes some sense, though it won't always be the explanation, but in this and some other cases, I believe full well it could be what's happening or what happened. So what's Minnie's theory? She believes, and again, I tend to agree, that extraterrestrials, or at the very least the Greys, have the ability to shapeshift into anything. She believes she just happened to see an owl, and that in this owl, or whatever other form, they are able to very easily spy on humanity, and specifically abductees and hybrids as well. Believe it or not, the list is actually very, very long of the forms, mainly animals, that ETs in general are supposedly able to take on. It's mainly thought to be, though, cats, black cats especially, owls, German Shepherd dogs, and even deer. That's just a few of the many, guys, believe me. I mean, if it's true or even to be believed, it's a rather ingenious idea. How would we ever know unless, like Minnie, we witness the transformation with our very own eyes? Let's move on to Joe from Newport Beach, California, who told his story to some people while at a conference called Contact in the Desert, which took place in 2014 in Joshua Tree, also in California. Joe is unlike Minnie in that he has had several encounters throughout his lifetime. Joe is a store manager, and it seems as though his encounters weren't of the abduction type either, but of the contactee variety. And guys, I've talked briefly about it before, but at least in my opinion, there is a huge difference between the two, between contactee and abductee. Think about making contact with a creep or a stalker, but then having them actually kidnap or abduct you, right? That's kind of what I liken it to. Weird analogy, but I hope that it makes sense. So Joe's experiences had him having a ton of communication with a very specific type of extraterrestrial entities where they discussed at length things like spirituality, the mind, and the body. The ETs he claimed contacted him were described as being very human looking with long hair and who could have easily passed for a regular human being as long as no one looked too closely or, as Joe did, engage them in any type of conversation. So let's talk about Giant Rock, California, which is close to the small town of Landers. I bring up the town of Landers for a reason, so please bear with me for a moment as we discuss a very famous, or rather infamous, contactee named George Van Tassel, who from the 1950s to the 1970s held outdoor UFO conferences on a yearly basis. This was brave back then, guys. This is quite spectacular, guys, because back in those days, there weren't things like the CE5 app or Close Encounters stories so much in the mainstream collective. So back to our witness, Joe, and it does all mesh together, so don't worry. Joe claims that in the year 2001, he went to this old rock in this area, and I'm sorry, but my source material was very unclear here, and I'm not sure if this old rock is located in Giant Rock or if it's located somewhere in Landers where George Van Tassel held his contactee groups. The information wasn't there. But either way, let's roll with it. So Joe says that at this rock, he met and communicated with an entity whose name was Capsona. Capsona was one of the aforementioned human-looking, long-haired beings who are kind of making me think of the Nordic aliens, but again, it's super vague in my source material, so I really can't be sure. Capsona was a woman, and she was almost unnaturally beautiful, and she was dressed in a long white gown. They sat there for hours discussing the state of humanity and how negative everything was at the time, or seemed to be in the moment, because as we all know, and I don't think I'm alone in this opinion, but I definitely could be, that it's gotten much, much worse, at least here in the United States. But honestly, with all of my friends, you guys out there all over the world, I've come to understand that the energy is just disgusting. And once again, the sleepers have taken over. But I'll stop ranting here, or at least I'll try, because I'm going to do some spirituality videos very, very soon while I have the time. And I'll be talking about all of that with you all. So stay tuned. But that just made me think like they thought they had it so bad back then, right? Anyways, Joe and Capsona discussed at length the state of the human race there at Old Rock that day. As soon as the sun started to set over the desert, though, Capsona told Joe he needed to take a step back from her, which he did, and he moved back about 40 feet away from her. According to Joe, with the blink of an eye, his beautiful extraterrestrial lady friend was all at once bathed in a quite unnatural but beautiful white light. Then suddenly she transformed right before his eyes into a gorgeous snow white owl. The owl was 4 feet tall and flew off very fast, again unnaturally so, into the dusky sky until she was completely and totally out of sight. Once again, there seems to be no missing time or screen memories here, which I don't know if it makes it better or worse, that it's seemingly so simplistic in that it's an extraterrestrial being shape-shifting into a giant owl. I don't know how tall Capsona was originally, but I don't think she was 4 feet. I think that would have been mentioned. So it was like she had to kind of shrink down even though the owl was huge. Does that make sense? I obviously have a ton of questions here, and I'm sure many of you guys do as well. One thing I have to put out there though is this: how inconspicuous really is a 4-foot owl? I mean, if they're really shape-shifting into animals in order to spy on us, then why wouldn't they just shape-shift into a regular sized owl? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, I'm definitely going to notice an owl the size of my 4-year-old or one the size of a small sedan, right? Are they shifting into regular sized animals as well? I truly have no idea, but I would love to hear your theories about it all. Now, let's get into screen memories. Screen memories seem to be the mind's way of turning a threatening or traumatizing situation into something exactly the opposite in order to protect us from the emotional or other types of trauma or horror that could cause us to literally shut down. Also, they could be being implanted by the ETs to protect us from not only remembering what happened for whatever unknown reason, but also because maybe they care and they don't want us to be traumatized or expecting them to come again, right? There's so much to it, guys, so much. And this is by far not only going to be part 1. And that definition I just gave you is an exact or proper. It's not like the official one. It's just something that I kind of came up with of what I believe they could be when they're not being implanted. So when they're not implanted screen memories, they're just our own. Why would they be implanted though? Is it as simple as protecting us from something? I'm not really sure, because I believe that the ETs put them there in our minds in order to make sure we don't remember and in turn report what they are doing to us, regardless of whether it's a positive or a negative experience. After all, let's think about how advanced we already know extraterrestrials to be. I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they can literally implant very specific and very real memories to cover up the real and actual memories of what happened to us or what they had done to us. Basically to make sure that the truth is never brought to the light of the public. Only it seems that as more and more abductees and contactees come forward, and as the collective becomes more enlightened in their views of these types of things, we as a whole are starting to see right through these deeply ingrained and very real seeming memories. To get back to what we're discussing here today in this video though, more and more lately it seems to be the vision of a creepy and surreal seeming owl that is the thread that leads to the unraveling of the entire thing. So it's like people start remembering seeing owls, giant or otherwise, and then they're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Why was an owl at the foot of my bed? There it goes. We've discussed so many times here on this channel Whitley Strieber and his experiences, and also his book Communion, which by the way, absolutely fascinating. The cover of his book is an image of what we have all basically come to learn, know, and accept as what we now call the alien grays. On December 26, 1985, right after the first encounter that Whitley reported, he claims his mind was filled to almost overflowing, where it was all he could ever think about for the longest time: images of owls. Is it all a giant coincidence, and do I need to once again and for the millionth time reiterate how I feel and what I believe about coincidences? I mean, I don't think so, right? Anyways, what many people aren't aware of when it comes to Whitley is that his sister also had her own possible experiences with an owl or owl imagery in the early 1960s, much earlier than Whitley himself started having, or at least remembers having had, his own abduction experiences. In his book Communion, which was published in 1987, he tells the story his sister recounted to him. She said she was driving in Texas in the United States between the towns of Kerrville and Comfort when, quote, she was terrified to see a huge light sail down and cross the road ahead of her. A few minutes later, an owl appeared in front of the car. I have to wonder if that is not a screen memory, but my sister has no sense of it, end quote. So again, if we're thinking back to Minnie, right, she said that her memories are in order. There's no way there's any missing time. There's no way anything really significant happened that she doesn't remember. But that's what Whitley's sister is also saying. But why the owl then? Why show itself at all? I mean, there has to be something more to that. There is another connection that could very well be made here, and I don't want to ramble as I sometimes do when I get excited about and fascinated by a subject, such as is the case with this particular one, but it definitely does need to be brought up. Let's discuss, just for a moment, cryptozoology. We've all heard of things like the Loch Ness Monster, the Mothman, and Bigfoot, but have any of you ever heard of the Owlman? Allegedly, this creature was first reported way back in 1976. Somewhere in the woods near Monnan Old Church in Cornwall, England. The witnesses all said that this thing was very human-like in a variety of ways, but it was also very animalistic in that it had very large wings, claws, and red eyes like fire. It also put out this energy of malevolence, and some said downright evil too. Some people have even drawn parallels with the aforementioned Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the United States. On Easter weekend in June of 1967, two young girls named Vicky and June Melling had an extremely unpleasant experience with a creature in the Monnan woods. They were exploring while on vacation with their parents, visiting an old abandoned church from the 13th century when they saw what they called, quote, a birdman, end quote, that was gigantic, humanoid, and had huge feathers. An author named John Downes wrote a book called Owlman and Others, and this is allegedly and seemingly when this incident and this creature were both first reported. Ever since this particular report came up, though, many others have come forward also claiming to have encountered the same beast in the same area. Is it cryptozoological, extraterrestrial, supernatural in nature? The experts are split about that and don't really know the answers to the whys or the hows, possibly even the whens. It could be a mix of all three or something else altogether. But in more recent years, it seems as though the reports have been a bit different, enabling us to glean a bit more information about what could actually have been encountered here and or what's actually being witnessed. I came across a report from an unnamed woman who claims to have lived at one time near the Monnan Woods, more specifically in the small Cornwall village of Gweek in England, G-W-E-E-K, Gweek. Between Monnan Woods and the village of Gweek, when traveling by car, is approximately 6.5 miles, give or take. She claims that in 1998, she had an extraordinary encounter with a UFO, and it has ever since profoundly been affecting her. She was actually driving the 6.5 miles from Monnan to Gweek after visiting a friend. It was late, about 11 at night, and she was making the return drive home from where her friend lived in Monnan to where she had previously moved to the town of Gweek. It wasn't more than a few minutes after exiting Monnan and while driving on the dark and desolate road, of course, to home that she had her encounter with a UFO, which was parked on the side of the road, looked to be about the size of a large beach ball, and was glowing a bright orange in color. In the blink of an eye, or so it seemed, and before she could quite understand what had happened to her, she was parked on the side of the road and missing 2 full hours of time. She had no idea how in the world she had ended up parked where she was when it seemed as though just a second ago she had been driving past this strange and somewhat unbelievable glowing beach ball spaceship thing. As she came to, she felt very groggy and disoriented, but remembered one very, very specific thing. A gigantic owl-like creature that also seemed somehow human in nature. It was simply hovering there on the side of the road in front of her vehicle. It was floating approximately 15 feet in the air, but to make things even stranger was that it seemed somehow to be defying our laws of gravity and that it wasn't using its wings to keep itself afloat. It was simply, and quite literally, hovering there and staring down at her. This sighting/encounter is said to have happened mere steps outside of the woods from which the first Owlman sighting had been reported, not only the first time back in 1976 by the 2 little girls vacationing with their parents, but also where it's been reportedly seen and encountered ever since. Our witness does admit that she was very familiar with the legends of the Owlman and all of the reported sightings right there in that area, as it was a small town and she lived there for a while, for long enough to hear all of the reports and rumors about this so-called creature. The frustrating part here is that aside from what I just previously told you she reported, the missing 2 hours, the owl creature, and the glowing orange ball of light, she had nothing else to say or report about any of it. There aren't yet any recovered memories as far as I could find anyways, and this is all we are left with. If I may speculate for a moment, I believe it's obvious she was abducted by extraterrestrials and the owl some sort of false screened memory. I say failed because she knew it was strange and not just a regular sighting of an owl in the woods, and also she remembered the glowing ship and realized she had the missing time there, the whole 2 hours. I'm not sure I believe in the cryptozoological concept here though with this particular creature, and think if we were able to come up with just a little more information or possibly speak to the witnesses / victims, it's almost definite that they've had some sort of abduction experience, or at the very least an encounter story which they haven't yet remembered. Again, I don't know exactly how the giant owl creature fits in, and it makes so much more sense to me to shapeshift into a regular sized animal, owl or otherwise, in order to be more convincing and much more capable of spying, if that's even what they're doing. I mean, is that a perfect idea? No. There are so many questions and contradictions, but in this community, sometimes that's all we're left with until further research and or information is presented to us. I also find it very interesting that the owl is always said to be the height of what we have come to know is the approximate height of the short or small alien grays. Think about that for a minute. I'm going to definitely continue this in another video really soon as we talk about how regular owls are most likely, at least some of the time, shape-shifting extraterrestrials, and how they use them for screen and implanted memories, and in some instances I found as well, to spy on certain humans. So stay tuned. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you just want to see me smile. Spread the love by sharing this video. Got to get that sub count up. Yay, yay, yay. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you have not checked out my Being on the Show Disembodied Voices with Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz on the Powerflix Network, please do that. It's episode 6, season 3, Disembodied Voices. They give a free 7-day trial, so a 7-day free trial, and if you want it monthly, it's $3.99 a month, or you can cancel before the free trial is up. Get in there and please watch my interview. It's a double interview, 2 hours of me talking about literally everything, guys, and I could really use the support and I really appreciate it. In the description box, you will find links to my books, Missing the Fae Theory and Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, on Amazon, both the Kindle and paperback version. Now, I have a ton of the second book left over from my book signing. So if you'd like to autograph copies of either one of the books, please email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com and I'll get those right out to you. On Wednesday nights, live intuitive oracle with me and Steven, Ghost Dragon ZW, right here on this channel from 7:15ish p.m. to 11:30ish p.m. Eastern Time, where I pull one random card and give you a weekly reading for donation or otherwise. If you need to get in touch with me for any other reason to talk with me about your paranormal, supernatural, extraterrestrial, otherworldly, whatever encounters, I am going to do a listener encounter 16, guys, just with everything going on, moving and all that. It's been really hard, but I'm doing the best that I can. But that is coming, so keep sending them in. Be patient with me with emails and responding to comments. I'm trying to do better and be more focused with that. Ways to donate to the channel: PayPal and Cash App, links in the description box, or my Patreon. Okay, if you donate $20 a month or more through Patreon, I will give you a personal intuitive oracle reading, a remote, every single month, just as kind of a bonus gift and a thank you. If you would like to purchase a personal intuitive oracle reading from me, the remotes are half price through Thanksgiving because they did so well when I did them for the month of October. So $20 personal intuitive oracle reading from me. That's like 7 to 10, sometimes 12 cards. Or if you want to do a face-to-face through video chat, hit me up about that as well. GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Donations are super important, guys, because that's how I keep the show running and also how I live, right? I just finished with the editing and the cover concept of the 3rd book, Shadow Entities Beyond Sleep Paralysis. We had to cut the title a little bit there, but it is coming and I'm super excited. Also, the link for my Amazon wish list gift link, if you want to send me a gift, always appreciate it. Usually decks and crystals and all that kind of stuff, some crystal jewelry, all kinds of things on there. Like, I don't even know what's on there, to be honest with you. So many things, thousands of items if you want to just send me a little gift. And everyone who's donated, sent gifts, gotten personals, subscribed, shared, came to the book signing, I really do appreciate you guys and the support so very much. As always, I know I'm forgetting something, but these endings are getting super duper long. I love you guys. Be kind to each other. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you're beautiful, you're deserving, you're smart, you're capable, you're strong, you're fierce, you're independent, you are amazing. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.